What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and this is eBay Miniature Rescues. Today, we're going to make some seriously cool swamp-themed Sylvaneth for Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Swampy tree people, not something you see very often in Age of Sigmar. With Sylvaneth, you usually get the 4 seasons approach, and don't get me wrong, I really like that approach and I've done a few myself. But I was looking around the other day and came across something so compelling, so insane, that I knew that I had to try it for myself. The Bog Sylvaneth. Come on now. Tell me that's not compelling. Bloated, wood-rotten tree people. So good. There isn't even any real reason that I want to own these other than to just try out the conversion, and that could lead to some other interesting conversions down the road. What I mean is, subscribe if you haven't. There's plenty more to come. Personally, I'm going to be building some spite revenants, since that really was the first thing that drew me into this type of conversion. In fact, this one specifically from @nafnaf81, I'll put a link in the description. The way that these guys look really hooked me in and pushed me to try this out. Alright, so in order to start your own little swamp, there are some things you'll probably need. Let's head to eBay and look up the proper parts. Or at least what I think are the proper parts. I'm guessing. The first thing you'll need is a box of tree revenants. This box comes in around 34 bucks and includes enough stuff to make either tree revenants or spite revenants. If you can find these parts separate for cheaper, then that's even better. Anything to lower the cost. The second thing you need are plague bearers. Luckily, these guys are generally in good supply on eBay, so you can pick and choose what you want based on your current needs. This buy it now for 20 bucks for 5 of them is probably the best deal that I've found today. It might be better when you look, you really never know. Either way, a new box is 30 bucks for 10, so saving some money would be nice. In the end, I paid $48.99 total for a new box of revenants and a 10-man squad of plague bearers. I'd say anything around 50 bucks is probably pretty good for a conversion like this, and really the only way to drop the price would be to buy the parts individually, which you can do, but it can be time consuming and tedious. Sometimes you just have to spend the extra couple bucks so the project doesn't get abandoned. Like, I'd probably just leave this on a shelf. Okay, so it's time to start constructing our swampy friends. First things first, let's take a look at our inventory of materials. We have twice the bodies we need, but only an exact count on legs, so we can't mess up the legs. Arms seem to be a non-issue. There are a ton of varieties in this box as far as that goes. For heads, we only have 5 of the actual spite revenant heads, so I'm going to try really hard not to drop one. Other than those specific things, everything else is pretty much up for grabs. There are some extra bits that we can incorporate into each model to make them unique and fun. Let's start by cutting off the parts of the plague bearer that don't really matter. We're mostly after the body here, so the arms, legs, and head need to go. Using an X-Acto blade, a fresh one, you can pretty easily cut flush lines through GW plastic. And since most of these joints are already separate, it makes it pretty easy to get through and get the parts that we need. I pick through some of the sprues and grab one of the revenant bodies, and a head. Remember, we only have a limited number of heads and bodies, and they're pretty small. I almost lost several pieces to the black hole that is my hobby floor. Doing a bit of size comparison, the bodies are very similar, which should make things fit together rather easy, at least for the arms and legs. The head on the revenants are a little weird, so we'll need to play around with the placement. Once the pieces are removed from the body, we can test and dry fit some of the other pieces to get an idea of what we actually need to do. After getting a good angle on the pieces, I cut the legs from my limited stock of revenant bodies. With a flat surface on both parts, the legs actually fit quite nicely together on these guys. That always feels pretty good when you're doing conversions. The arms were very similar to the legs. Normally, they fit into a round hole that gets glued into place. But for these guys, I just snipped off the ball joint and glued that together flat. The chest piece on the Revenants did make it a little harder though. Normally, it wraps around a little ghostly body. In this case, I snipped around those parts and got them to fit into the Plaguebearer body halfway decently. That gave some of these an easy way to attach the arms, while others I had to kind of improvise. Each model was its own little project. Each body went together a little differently, but keeping the swampy bog theme in mind, I think I was able to make some really unique and fun characters for this squad. For a lot of the gap filling, I would normally opt for milliput or green stuff, but in this case, I decided to use a GW texture paint to cover a majority of the cut pieces and joints. A Grelin earth applied in a thick coat will not only cover any issues with the model, but it will crack apart when it dries, giving us that dried out skin look on our bloated, swampy bodies. It's a perfect way to bring it all together, and if there's anything else that gets missed even after painting, there are more options that will help sell this look even more. After everything is dried, I'm going to throw some sand onto the bases around any of the cracked earth texture. This will be our starting place for the swamp bases. And lastly, applying a nice white xenopho highlight over black primer, we can really see how these guys are going to look. As far as painting goes, I have a few ideas, but I really need to do some tests of those ideas on something that isn't one of the final models. That leads us to the sponsor of this week's video. My Mini Factory presents Birchwood Vale by RM Printable Terrain. Birchwood Vale is so much more than just another crowdfunding campaign. This isn't just a random assortment of miniatures in a theme. It's an adventure that includes 3D printable miniatures, terrain, adversaries, and monsters. Everything you could need in one place. It's pretty much everything you would need for kind of a large set of different things that you'd want to do. I like this set because there is a good amount of variety, and even for something like what I'm doing in this video, there was something to pick out. So for this video, I decided to use one of the terrain pieces in this set as an objective marker or kind of a display base for the games that these swamp tree people will hopefully be seeing. The best part is I was able to send this file to the printer and not even have to worry about whether or not it would print properly. This incredible stone angel, named the Forest Waypoint in the campaign, is in a category called no support printing, which means it was designed to be printed without having to go through the hassle of using any supports at all. I am honestly a huge fan of that. No thinking 3D printing? Yeah, I'll just jump on board. For the rest of the files in this campaign, they are pre-supported, which is an awesome way to go as well. If you are interested in checking out this awesome campaign, check the links in the description below, and thank you again, My Mini Factory and RM Printable Terrain for supporting miniature painters. Now that this statue is ready to go, I'm going to sit back and have some fun experimenting. I'm planning on using a variety of products and techniques to get that swampy look. I want these tree men to look pretty awesome when I'm done, so I'm going to try and take my time in getting that look that I like. Here are some of the products that I want to try out. The AK Moss and Green Slime seem like a killer combo for a swamp, and I have a pretty large bottle of realistic water on hand for all the water features. We'll see how it comes together. Either way, taking this opportunity now to really just have some fun and play around will give me a good idea on how I want to finish these guys off. Besides being an objective marker or even just a cool piece of terrain for my table, I want this to be like a display base for those bloated monstrosities. something I can put them on and have the whole thing just kind of make sense together, all in one piece. I'll start by pinning the 3D printed scenery to the base. I just want to make sure this won't go anywhere, although with all the other stuff I want to add, I have a feeling that this thing is going to be pretty solid. Still, it doesn't hurt to pin. Once some of the larger framing rocks are in, I add a ton of PVA so that I can do a sandy floor. The sand I have is a really fine beach sand, but there are also some little rocks in there too, so it makes for a really good ground texture. I also decided to put a bunch of real fine stuff onto the actual statue. It makes it look like it's even older, and there's moss and plants that have just been growing on it for a long time. After the glue has dried, I'll hit the whole thing with another coat of primer. That way the sand is locked into place and we don't have to worry about any of it falling off. Now it's time to bring in some color to our statue. We want swampy colors to match our eventual goals, but I also want it to stand out on its own as a piece of terrain. So I'm going to lightly go over the model with white ink. This is really just bringing out some of the highlights and will be a great place to start to put a filter color over the top of that. I'll start with some green and lightly go over the stone, then bring in some blue for the shadows. Not only will this blue make for a good shadow, but we also get a bit of reflection off of that water that eventually will be on the base. Or at least that's my intention. A dry brush of an off-white with a very large, soft makeup brush will bring out a lot of the details and cracks in the stone. I'm trying not to overdo it, but if we do, it's alright, because the next step should bring it all together. Green enamel wash. This stuff has the flexibility to go on thick and be completely removed if we want. So I'm just gonna paint bravely and get in there with it. I think this really starts to bring out that old stone look and ties the other colors together. Where the dry brush highlights were too strong, this really tempers them and brings them back down. While the enamel is still wet, I'm going to start to add some moss and plants. Using AK Interactive Moss in a can, I just lightly shake it over the model. You can see it gets picked up by the still wet enamels and sticks to the model really nicely. The green enamel really makes this stuff look awesome. It's not too thick, so it looks pretty realistic right out of the bottle. After that, I'll go about adding some extra plants and tufts, mask off the edge of the base, and pour my water in. And that pretty much does it for this display bay / objective marker. I'm gonna let it sit and hopefully in 24 hours, it will look absolutely amazing. As far as this project goes, I am really happy with the way that it's turning out so far. Sometimes you just come across something so compelling that it makes you stop and really think about it. For me, seeing those pictures of Bog Sylvaneth, probably should pick a name eventually, it really made me want to just try and do something like that. Will it be perfect? Probably not, but they will be my version of a really cool idea, and hopefully I can get there. This week, we converted some models and painted a cool base. Next week, I'm going to paint the rest of the models to match. Hopefully by the end of it, there will be a really cool set of miniatures set atop a display base / objective marker, and it's going to be pretty awesome. And with that being said, please subscribe so you don't miss it. For now, enjoy these Bog Sylvaneth and base. Thank you for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you liked something about this video, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, as it really helps out the channel. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video.